So, hello there. I've got a lot to cover, so I'm just going to jump right into it. I worked on a game called Life Goes On, and this is a puzzle platformer where you sacrifice knights and use their dead bodies to solve puzzles. And I have a bit of a prediction where if you haven't heard of this, you're probably looking at it and thinking, oh, that sounds pretty cool. That sounds like an interesting idea. But from experience, I know that you're not going to go home and buy it. And you might want to think about why that is, because that's very relevant to the rest of my talk. Though, of course, if you want to prove me wrong, please do buy it. So Life Goes On released on Steam in 2014. We did a PlayStation 4 release with a major content expansion in 2016. And while we were working on these things, we thought that we kind of maybe had a hit on our hands. We had media coverage, we had awards that we won. A lot of people that we talked to just thought we were making something super cool, but you probably know where this is going. We never really saw the results that we thought we were going to when we launched it. And so in trying to understand what went wrong and trying to understand how come our market reality didn't meet our expectations, I've become a little bit obsessed with market analysis. Oh, and I'm not clicking forward. There we go. So this slide is made as a bit of a joke, but really it's been surprising just how valuable it's been to dig into this market analysis stuff. But why does this topic matter? So I'm not saying that you should be looking at everything you do in game development, making indie games, solely from the point of view of making money. If you're making games to get rich, you probably shouldn't be here today. You should be doing something else. But there's also lots of non-commercial reasons to make games. But if you're doing this as a job, if you're starting a studio, if you're starting a company, if you have an idea for your game and you think, I can use this idea to pay my rent, then you have to think about this idea of what does the market want. So I want to present the idea that it's not just about luck. It's not just about having good connections. It's not just about being able to do really amazing marketing and promotion work. Those are all really valuable things, but they don't touch on this idea of market fit. And I think that's a very important thing. And so a lot of what I'm talking about is trying to understand what do people want, and particularly, do enough people want what you're making to justify your expense in making it? And we never really thought about that when we worked on Life Goes On. We sort of knew that we had this cool idea, and it was really fun to make these goofy puzzles, and it was really neat, and people thought it was really cool, but we never really gave much thought to, is this something that might sell? So I'm gonna, oops, oh well. So I'm gonna say that what I'm talking about is selling indie games on Steam right now, and as you get away from that, what I'm saying might be less relevant. I don't necessarily know, but free to play is different from paid games. Console has a different market dynamic than indie games on Steam. Mobile is even more different. And Steam has seen huge changes in the last year. So what's relevant today might change quite a bit in the near future. So if you're familiar with this stuff at all, you are probably familiar with Steam Spy. And Steam Spy started life as a system that scraped user profiles on Steam and did statistical sampling to estimate how many people owned a game, how many people had it in their library, how many people played it. And this really kicked off a golden age of market analysis. But unfortunately, the fun came to an end in April, where Valve changed their systems, changed their rules, and made it that by default, the user profiles aren't public. But Steam Spy isn't actually dead. He's still operating the service, but now there's some significant caveats. Only broad estimates of ownership numbers for other games on Steam are available for free now. If you want a more precise estimate, you have to subscribe to a monthly fee. It uses a machine learning algorithm from sort of public data sources to kind of make an estimate. And The details of what his algorithm is doing or how accurate it is aren't really public. He's not really sharing that information, and so accuracy is reduced. But it's still a useful service. But something to keep in mind too with Steam Spy, with both the old Steam Spy numbers and the new Steam Spy numbers, is that owners are not the same thing as sales. There's lots of different ways that a game can get into someone's Steam library that doesn't actually involve them buying it. Bundles, giveaways, the free weekends can massively inflate owner counts. So always keep that in mind when you're talking about Steam Spy numbers. So what other data sources do we have out there? One of the best is actually the Steam review counts. There's a technique called the Boxlighter method. This is where you estimate the number of people who own a game and have played it by multiplying the review count by 50. Based on some stats I've run and some numbers, this is actually a pretty accurate estimate. Though games might have a much higher or much lower, it is accurate but very broad. So the 95 percentile estimate is something like 17 to 150 for that multiplier. But 50 is a reasonable, rule of thumb. Jake Berklet of Gray Alien Games wrote a really good article about this. His estimate was more like 82, but you can read his blog and see why he thinks that's the right number. In addition to Steam Spy and Steam reviews, there's a lot of other information out there. You can get discount and bundle history from Is There Any Deal? You can get concurrent player history from Steam Charts. You can get regional price differences and loads of package details from SteamDB. And let's talk about the actual markets. What are the factors in sort of what things sell, what things don't, that sort of thing. So you may have heard this before, particularly if you've made a game and it didn't sell very well. You just need to make a better game. So quality, it does matter, but to think that game quality is the only factor in success, or even that it's the dominant factor, is the fallacy of believing that the world is just and fair. And that's not always true. So For Life Goes On, we won some awards, we have pretty good user scores, Metacritic, that sort of thing. It's far from a perfect game. I can list loads of things that are wrong with it, and I wish we had done better. But the biggest sort of surprising thing is that when we did our Done to Death expansion with our PlayStation 4 port, we significantly raised the quality bar of the game. The expanded game is a much, much better game, but the audience response, and particularly the sales response to that, was the same. And that was a real surprise, and that really motivated a lot of this research. And so now I'm going to say, I hope you like stats. I've done some really rough revenue estimates for every non-free-to-play game on Steam. This is based on a full scrape of the Steam store performed on April 10th. April 10th was like the last day of the old Steam Spy algorithm. And so this is 5 months old, but I've sort of spot checked a lot of this against kind of more recent data, and it seems to still, the trends seem to be largely unchanged. This is rough. I don't have error bars on these data points because the data sources are very noisy. It's a broad kind of trend analysis, not a really super precise thing. This doesn't account for DLC or in-app purchases either. This is just initial sales. So this chart particularly that we're looking at here is comparing Steam user score to revenue, estimated revenue. So user score is the rating system on Steam. And the revenue here, the y-axis, is shown on a log scale. So that means the points at the top of the graph have several orders of magnitude more revenue than the points at the bottom of the graph. And because it's just after lunch and that's a perfect time to do math, I'm going to tell you all about Spearman's Row. This is a correlation measure that basically just says if X goes up, does Y go up? So if we had a 1.0, a row of 1, that would be a perfect correlation. If it was 0, it would mean we were looking at random noise. Here, a row of 0.31 indicates that we've sort of got medium to low connection. But we do see some connection between Steam games ratings and how much revenue they see, so that's really good. Another possible thing to look at here is Metacritic. So, and again, this time the revenue again here is log scale, and this is the full data set for Steam. This time the connection is actually stronger. A row of 0.45 is getting into sort of medium to strong territory. So we are seeing some evidence that quality matters, with both critic and gamer scores having some correspondence, some predictive power for revenue. So if you make a better game, you will trend to seeing more revenue. And I think this is really encouraging because that this is true on Steam, because I don't know that it's true in a lot of marketplaces. The next thing I want to talk about is genre. And this is sort of the far out view of how viable different types of games are. Another way to look at this is should you make a puzzle platformer in 2018? The answer is no. So once upon a time, games like Fez and Braid and Limbo, they practically defined what indie success was, but the market has really dramatically shifted since then, and there's been very few breakout puzzle platformer successes since about 2014. And to explore this, I did some genre analysis based on the Steam tags. So for these charts, these bar charts that we're looking at, I've restricted these just to indie games. It's a noisy data set working with the tags. I did some filtering. And this is the median estimated revenue for puzzle platformers on Steam, that's the bottom left data point there. And I marked this at 1, and I'm expressing everything else in multiples of puzzle platformer median revenue, because that's my metric standard unit of disappointment is that number. And so you can see here, looking at this, that we have City Builder, the median City Builder in the middle of the list. That City Builder game is doing 7 times the revenue that the middle of the list puzzle platformer is doing. And this is strictly looking at indie games. If you expand this to the full Steam library and include AAAs, you see, City Builders are doing 20 times the revenue that a puzzle platformer is doing. Another idea that I've encountered is tone, that the Steam audience wants darker and grittier games. And so that's an interesting question. Do we have any evidence for this? Valve shared the top 100 games of 2017. And when you look through this list, I would say that it's pretty dark and pretty gritty. There's some obvious exceptions. There's like Rocket League, Cuphead, and these are bright and cheerful, at least in appearance. But there's still sort of a seriousness and tone to these games. They're not goofy or silly. And I think that's another factor that made it difficult to sell Life Goes On. Even though the sacrifice element is dark, the tone and humor are quite goofy. And of course, we have to look at the data. This is ESRB recommended age versus our log scale revenue estimate. And here we're seeing a row of 0.43. So that's pretty similar to the correlation with Metacritic score. So getting a higher Metacritic score has about as much predictive power of selling well as having a M rating from the ESRB. And this difference is even more dramatic when we look at median revenue by ESRB category. The median mature game is over 15 times the median E-rated game. And again, when I'm looking at these bar charts, that's just for indies. So this is even more true in AAA space, where you have some huge, huge hits that are M. It goes up to something like 38 times if you look at the full Steam library. So you have Rocket League, Planet Coaster, Kerbal Space Program. These are all E-rated games, and they're some of the top selling games on Steam, but the typical E-rated game has comparatively little revenue. One potential contributing factor to that is that Steam is an online store, and so you need a credit card to buy games. And so that makes it a lot easier for adults to buy versus kids. I also looked at this by tags. We have the puzzle platformer tag in there, and actually there are a few tags to the left of it, which is surprising to see. There's family friendly with the median revenue, down at 4.8 or something like that, and colorful is even worse. So if puzzle platformers are in a tough spot, then that's not where you want to be compared to something like survival horror or that sort of thing. We see dark does much better than colorful. If we included AAAs, we'd be looking at crime up at 30 times multipliers. But yeah, and then war and military and these sorts of tags in the AAA space have massively higher revenues. And so another thing to keep in mind, again here, is that this is Steam-based research. The story for family-friendly games on the Nintendo Switch is probably quite a bit different. This is sort of a surprising one, and that's a big factor in commercial success seems to be play times. How long do people play your game for? Is your game sticky? Is there a lot of content? Is it highly replayable? Is there multiplayer? Steam systems reward long play times. For example, I can't tell you how many times I've seen the little pop-up window telling me that a friend of mine is playing Spelunky. And this makes me think, maybe I should play Spelunky. It's interesting to look at average play times for some of the classic games that I was talking about with Limbo and Fez and Braid, and we can see they're sort of in this 3-hour average play time. And you compare that to some more recent hits, Stardew, RimWorld, Factorio. People are playing these games 10 or 20 times as long as they were playing those older games. And of course, sadly, Life Goes On's playtime is more in line with the first groups than the second. Let's look at this from a scatter plot. Here we have average playtimes against estimated revenue. This time our X scale going along the bottom is also a log scale. So points to the right, people are playing exponentially longer. And we can definitely see this upward trend, and we can see a fairly high row value of 0.55. But this graph looks kind of funny. There's this, we've got this strange blob, this strange line. What's up with that? So those games are clustered kind of around the 3 hour and 20 minute mark. It looks like they have a lot of players, but maybe not a lot of actual sales on Steam. So here I've plotted that exact same data set, but this time the games in red are the games that have Steam trading cards. So this shows evidence of games that are being created solely for exploiting the Steam trading card system. And that's something that Valve really cracked down on last year. And it's super neat to see that crazy blob in the data, but don't get too fixated on that. The really interesting thing here is this really strong trend where as playtimes go up, revenue goes up. And we can even look at this with those trading card games removed and the data filtered a little bit. We lose a lot of valuable data, but our row actually goes up to slightly higher. So this seems to be a very strongly linked factor to commercial success on Steam. So I want to talk about streaming a tiny bit. YouTube, Twitch, we all know super important for getting your indie game out there, have visibility. But it seems that not all games benefit from this equally. When you watch a streamer play a game, do you say, oh wow, I have to play that for myself? Or do you come away from it thinking that you've seen everything the game has to offer? And I think that short narrative-heavy games, puzzle games, that sort of thing, that have consumable content can actually be hurt by streamers and Let's Plays. I can share a couple of examples about that. The first comes from XGen Studios. YouTuber Matt Shea did 6 episodes on their game Super Motherload, and XGen estimates that this drove around $10,000 to $15,000 in revenue for Super Motherload. That same YouTuber also played their new point-and-click adventure game, The Low Road. This resulted in 0 visible boost in revenue. I have another example. So PewDiePie is the #1 YouTube channel. He played the very awesome Crypt of the Necrodancer, and that video has, when I last looked at it, about 2.4 million views. Jacksepticeye doesn't have quite as many followers as PewDiePie, but he's up there, and he played Life Goes On. The videos have sort of similar numbers of views. Ryan Clark, the Necrodancer's developer, shared that when PewDiePie played his game, this resulted in direct revenue of about $60,000. The direct revenue from Jack's video on Life Goes On, $500. So Crypt of the Necrodancer, Super Motherload have procedural generation, they're highly replayable. On the other hand, Life Goes On and The Low Road, far less so. The next thing I want to talk about a little bit is multiplayer and community. Can a community get involved? Are there level editors, mod support, leaderboards? Do players spread your game? Life Goes On has none of these. You may be noticing a trend here. Looking at the tag data, we can see this trend showing up, where moddable and team-based are 22 times the median revenue of your typical puzzle platformer. And this tag is also an extreme outlier for AAA games. You have to be careful with this thinking, though. At 0.43, 4-player local is one of the lowest median revenue tags in my analysis. Game designers love to make 4-player local games, but it seems that they're a tough sell on Steam. So these factors that I've been talking about, they're just the ones that I could find numbers for. They're not necessarily the only factors that contribute to market fit. And I'm not saying that it's impossible to buck any of these trends. There are lots of super successful games that don't line up with this perfectly. And also, if you want to make your own short, colorful, family-friendly puzzle platformer, feel free. But approach it thoughtfully and be aware that you're going to be facing an uphill battle. I've gotten the question, well, what about targeting a niche? And you might feel like I'm just looking at the top sellers lists here and that indie games are all about finding that niche audience that loves what you're doing. And I will say, yes, absolutely, finding a niche is important, but you have to be sure that that niche is viable. So yeah, like if you can tell me out there somewhere there is this target audience that really wants more puzzle platformers, please come talk to me after my talk because I have a game I want to sell them. To give you an example of a narrowly targeted but viable niche, think about Zachtronics games. These are basically engineering challenges for programmers, which seems about as niche as it can get. Well, the median programming tag game is about 3.6 times as successful as our puzzle platforming standard. So way more viable, despite its niche, narrow appeal. And I'm also saying it's not about cloning. I'm not saying you should look at the top-selling games and copy them. Again, like if you're just making games to make money, there are easier ways to make money. Go do something else. But most designers have lots of ideas. So when you're looking at the different types of games that you might want to make, evaluate those ideas for market fit. Make something unique based on that. And be aware of market trends. Are you targeting a genre that's in demand? Does your design accommodate long play times? What would it take to adjust your design to offer that? And if you are making a game right now that you are interested in selling on Steam, or you have an idea that you think might make for a good Steam game, I have some homework for you to do. Go to the Steam store page and pull up the tag search. You can add a couple of tags to sort of narrow down the list of games. That's up here, and sort it by release date. And just go through a couple of pages of games that have released recently in your genre. Look at their store pages, look at their review counts, read their reviews, evaluate how they compare to what your expectations of success are and what your expectations of kind of the quality level that you can deliver. You need to find the successes and the failures. And you need to understand what differentiates those if you want your game to fall in that success category. Steam Spy can also be very helpful in this sort of analysis. It's much more valuable if you have the paid version, but you can still do a rough version of this with the free version, where you can go into a single tag. You can't narrow by multiple tags, but sort a single tag by owners. And what's going to be very, very tempting is to just look at page 1, the very first page of owners. But the problem with that is people have this thinking that, Hotline Miami sold millions of copies, so surely my game will sell hundreds of thousands of copies. But that can lead you astray. You don't have to look at the bottom of the list. Usually the least popular games on Steam have, it's evident why, they're typically low effort. You can understand why they're least popular. What becomes really valuable is looking at the middle of the list. If there are 30 pages of games under the tag, what do the games on page 15 look like? How is their performance? And how do the quality of those games compare to what you think you're going to be delivering? Just to give you a little bit of an epilogue for Life Goes On as I'm wrapping up here, we continued to support the game. Localization ended up being surprisingly successful for us. We didn't have a lot of words in the game, and so we were able to get our game into China. And we've sort of done okay in the long term. We kind of got lucky in that we've been able to hit some opportunities, and we've sort of scraped and fought our way to some success, but we never really saw what we thought we were going to based on our launch. I can tell you about a couple of more resources. Ryan Clark, the Crypto Next Advance developer, he used to do a regular Twitch stream called the Clark Tank. He might be bringing it back, but it's not active right now. But there are archived episodes on YouTube. You should check those episodes out. A lot of the ideas that are in those talks, that were in this talk, came from Ryan, and it's a fantastic resource. Another thing that's sort of interesting is the ICO Partners Steam newsletter, and this is a weekly newsletter that lists all of the new releases on Steam and sorts them by review count, just as a way to sort of estimate how successful those releases were. So this sort of lets you keep track of what is coming out on Steam. If you want to talk about this stuff, please hit me up on Twitter, Eric E. Johnson, Eric with a K. I am happy to help. I am happy to talk about this. Please do reach out to me, and thank you very much for your time.